Milling Through History presents The Shot Heard Round the World. It was in February of 1775 that George III declared there was a state of rebellion in the colonies. As such, the British were now on high alert, and for the Americans who knew that their actions were certainly beginning to get the better of the British, it was only a matter of time before something was going to occur. For General Gage, he was ordered by the British monarchy to find the arms, munitions, and leaders of the rebellion. And after 7 years of occupation in the city of Boston, any movement of British soldiers became commonplace, and if there was new activity, almost immediately an alarm would be sounded amongst the American colonists. It was as if everyone was itching for a war, and yet nobody knew who would actually begin it. Well, it was on April the 18th, 1775, that General Gage would give the fateful order that it was time to go to the city of Concord and there capture the rebel ammunition supplies that they were trying to go ahead and use to mount some type of insurrection. And so Gage would give orders for patrols to exit out of Boston and secure the roads leading from the city. By doing so, any attempt to warn the rebels would immediately be stopped. And yet, this change in regular routine activity was more than enough to begin sounding an alarm. As a result, Gage decided to send British soldiers forward in the cover of night in order to attempt to seize the supplies in Concord without anyone realizing that the move was already underway. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith of the British Army was put in command of this force. However, even as he was preparing his men for the march, the Americans were already well aware of the fact that the British would one day come to Concord and attempt to take all of their military store supplies. As such, they had made preparations well in advance for the movement of these weapons and ammunition to protect them from any British looting that may occur. When the British did leave Boston, Paul Revere and other riders began to spread the word throughout the countryside. And while Paul Revere's midnight ride is certainly very famous, he was not the one to complete it. Instead, it was Samuel Prescott, and word would spread very quickly about the events that were going on. By the time Colonel Smith and his forces had left Boston and reached the other side of Boston Sound, already 25 miles of landscape was well aware of his movement before even he took his first step, marching towards Concord. In the wee hours of April the 19th, 1775, the Lexington militia had been assembled, and under the command of Captain John Parker, they were still uncertain as to whether or not a British force was actually moving towards Concord. For Parker, he was well used to the fact that the British had marched to Concord, found nothing, and then came back empty-handed, and he fully anticipated that this might happen once more. In order to go ahead and ensure that there was no chance of anyone misunderstanding what was going on, Parker very carefully placed his men on Lexington Green, specifically to be seen as a show of force in parade formation, but not a force that was blocking any movement of traffic on the road leading to Concord. When the advance guard of British soldiers arrived in Lexington, they found the colonists on the green and immediately took up positions meant to surround the militia and disarm them. Major Pitcairn, who was the commanding officer on the field, would order the militia to disperse, but when they did not disperse fast enough, the British made preparations to force the colonists from the green. Upon realizing what was happening, Captain Parker would order his men to leave the field. However, due to the confusion of all the shouting, both from the British and the Americans, someone would fire a shot, and still, to this day, nobody knows who did it. Both the Americans and the British claim that the other side was responsible for making this first shot. However, no witnesses' account ever went ahead and indicated who it was that actually fired this fatal shot. By the time order was restored, however, 8 Americans were killed and 10 more were wounded. For the British, there was only one casualty, and that was just of a wound. As a final jest, the British would fire a victory volley and then proceed off to Concord. And after leaving, word of what happened at Lexington Green spread almost as quickly as that of the British movement. As a result, the first shot for the War of Independence was fired, and the words Captain Parker had said to his men became ever clearer. He had said, "Stand your ground. Don't fire unless fired upon, but if they mean to have a war, let it begin here." Be sure to click like, share, and subscribe for future episodes of Milling Through History. And be sure to leave comments below for future episode ideas. And be sure to look at our suggested reading page.